Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This is the very important lecture about the MCQs on the bioenergetics, carbohydrates, and the metabolism of carbohydrates. Insulin increase the following pathways in liver except. So insulin is not control the synthesis of the glucose. The conversion of glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate is an example of which of the following reactions. So it is a very important step in the process of glycolysis. So it is called the isomerization, जिसमें ग्लूकोज 6-phosphate फ्रक्टोज 6-phosphate में कन्वर्ट होता है. Fructose intolerance is to. Fructose intolerance is to the fructose and sucrose both. The monosaccharide glucose is best described by which one of the following statement? So monosaccharide, it forms part of a disaccharide sucrose. Chemical compounds involved in the process of metabolism is known metabolites. The catabolic pathways is exergonic in nature. It is true or false? So it is true. Which of the following has a spiral metabolic pathway? So amongst these, glycolysis, citric acid cycle, glycoxylate cycle, fatty acid synthesis cycle. So fatty acid cycle, fatty acid synthesis, biosynthesis is the spiral metabolic pathway. What is a spiral? So metabolism involves the generation of energy and synthesis of biological molecule. We know it is the definition of the metabolism, that a chemical reaction that involve in the body that is mainly responsible for the generation of energy. It can follow several paths like the spiral pathway for fatty acid synthesis, the linear pathways for glycolysis. तो glycolysis we know that glucose से direct pyruvate बनते हैं, तो linear pathway है. और cyclic pathway is also the metabolic pathway. तो citric acid cycle is a cyclic pathway. तो हम कह सकते हैं कि cyclic pathway भी होता है, linear pathway भी होता है और spiral pathway. cyclic की example citric acid cycle है, linear की example glycolysis है और spiral की example fatty acid biosynthesis है. Name the type of the pathway which is involved in the synthesis of compounds. तो compound is always synthesized in the anabolic pathway, जिसमें monomer मिलके polymers बनते हैं. Which of the following cycle shows amphibolic pathway? Important MCQs है 2022 का. तो it is the citric acid cycle that is also called the amphibolic pathway. Number of ATP molecule generated in the conversion of glycogen of lactate is. जब glycogen से lactate बनेगा तो how much ATP will produce? It will produce 2 ATP. Mark the incorrect statement about the metabolic pathway. It was also asked in the CAMU 2022 paper. So it is they follow the only oxidative process. So it is not correct because metabolic pathways follow both oxidation and reduction as well. NADPH is generated by the action of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. Hexose monophosphate shunt is of a great importance in cellular metabolism because it produces NADPH. What is the value of delta G when the system is in equilibrium? Bioenergetics का बहुत important question है. तो जब delta G free energy की वैल्यू क्या होगी जब सिस्टम इक्विलिब्रियम में होगा? तो इसका आंसर है delta G will be 0. Free energy will be 0. Glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency is seen in von Jerk's disease. Which of the following equation gives the relationship between delta G naught and the K? तो it is the equation, तो ये हमें याद करनी पड़ेगी. ऑप्शन नंबर ए इज करेक्ट. डेल्टा जी नॉट इज इक्वल टू माइनस आर टी लॉग ऑफ द के इक्वेशन. ठीक है, तो जो भी हमारे पास होगा ये ऑप्शन नंबर ए है. ये बायोएनर्जेटिक्स की कैलकुलेशन से और उससे ये क्वेश्चन उठाया है. Which of the following factor is not responsible for the actual change in free energy? Bioenergetics. तो actual change of free energy के लिए pH इन्वॉल्व नहीं होती. ये क्वेश्चन भी 2022 में पूछा जा चुका है. Which of the following will not enhance nutritional value of food? तो nutritional value of food को artificial sweeteners enhance नहीं करते. Cyanide poisoning causes death in seconds because. तो cyanide poisoning death क्यों cause करता है? Because it breaks the electron transport chain जो maximum ATP synthesis में रोल प्ले करता है. Ethanol decreases gluconeogenesis by converting NAD plus into NADH and decreasing the availability of pyruvate. Glycogenine is a protein primer for glycogen synthesis. Which of the following equation shows the relationship between the free energy change delta G and change in entropy delta S under the constant temperature and pressure? So it is the equation delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. Law of thermodynamics which states that energy can neither be created nor be destroyed is, तो ये फर्स्ट लॉ ऑफ थर्मोडायनेमिक्स है जिसमें ये बताया जाता है कि एनर्जी को ना तो क्रिएट किया जा सकता है ना ही डिस्ट्रॉय किया जा सकता है. डेल्टा जी नॉट इज डिफाइंड एज, तो डेल्टा जी नॉट की डिफिनेशन है एनर्जी रिक्वायर्ड इन कन्वर्टिंग 1 मोल ऑफ रिएक्टेंट्स टू 1 मोल ऑफ प्रोडक्ट्स. And enthalpy change for a reaction is zero, then delta G is equal to, और जब enthalpy change zero होगी तो delta G will be equation है minus T delta S naught. Patients suffering from von Gert's disease are unable to perform gluconeogenesis because they have a defect. तो पहले भी MCQ आ चुका है, वहाँ पे एंजाइम था, डिजीज का नाम पूछा था, यहाँ पे डिजीज है, अब एंजाइम का नाम आपको बताना पड़ेगा. तो इसमें है ग्लूकोज 6 फास्फेटेज. तो ग्लूकोज 6 फास्फेटेज की डिफिशियंसी की वजह से वॉन जर्स डिजीज होती है. The multi-step pathways of metabolism are efficient because they locate all of the enzymes for a pathway in the same place within the cell. Metabolic reactions, they break down complex molecules into smaller compounds, thereby releasing usable energy for the cell, are best described as, तो it is the catabolism जिसमें complex molecule simple में convert होते हैं, तो catabolism. Fructose diphosphate accumulation would, जब fructose disulfate accumulate होगा तो it will result in the stimulation of the glycolysis and inhibit gluconeogenesis. मोस्ट लिपोजेनिक, अब इनमें से सबसे ज्यादा लिपोजेनिक मॉलिक्यूल कौन सा है? तो फ्रक्टोज इज द मोस्ट लिपोजेनिक. टाइप 2 ग्लाइकोजन स्टोरेज डिसऑर्डर इज ड्यू टू डिफिशियंसी ऑफ, तो टाइप 2 जो स्टोरेज है वो अल्फा ग्लूकोसाइडेज की डिफिशियंसी की वजह से होता है. द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन के इक्वेशन एंड डेल्टा जी नॉट इज, तो इसके लिए वी हैव द डेल्टा जी नॉट इज इक्वल टू माइनस आर टी के. For a reaction if delta G is positive, then जब delta G positive होगा तो reactants will be favored. The reactants will be favored. Option number B is correct. Aldolysis splits fructose 1,6-biphosphate into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Dietary fibers rich in the cellulose. What is the respirasome? अब respirasome क्या होता है? तो the supramolecular complex of complex 1, complex 2 and 3 इसको respirasome कहते हैं. तो respirasome की थोड़ी सी explanation देखें तो respirasome is a supramolecular complex formed by the complex 1, 2 and 3 of electron transport chain. This supramolecular complex consists of complexes along with their prosthetic group. Only complex 4 would not take part in the formation of respirasome. तो जो complex 4 होता है वो respirasome का part नहीं होता. FES and FAD are the prosthetic groups of complex 2 of electron transport chain. Mark the incorrect statement about the coenzyme Q. Coenzyme Q इसमें से जो ऑप्शन नंबर डी है, इट हैज ए प्रोटीन बाउंड प्रोस्थेटिक ग्रुप, ये ऑप्शन ठीक नहीं है क्योंकि कोएंजाइम जो क्यू है ये एंजाइम तो नहीं है, इसको किसी किस्म की कोई प्रोस्थेटिक ग्रुप की जरूरत नहीं है. व्हाट इज द रिडक्शन पोटेंशियल? तो रिडक्शन पोटेंशियल बायोएनर्जेटिक्स में एन एटम और मॉलिक्यूल दैट गेन्स एन इलेक्ट्रॉन उसको हम रिडक्शन पोटेंशियल कहते हैं. What is the name of a molecule which donates its electrons? बायोएनर्जेटिक्स में बेसिक डेफिनेशन है, तो वो मॉलिक्यूल जो इलेक्ट्रॉन डोनेट्स करता है उसको हम रिड्यूसिंग एजेंट कहते हैं. Out of the following, which one is not the inhibitor of electron transport chain? तो इनमें से कौन सा इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसपोर्ट चेन को इनहिबिट नहीं करता? तो मेलोनेट नहीं करता क्योंकि मेलोनेट जो है इट इनहिबिट द सिट्रिक एसिड साइकिल बाय ब्लॉकिंग द कन्वर्जन ऑफ सक्सिनेट टू फ्यूमारेट. तो अक्सर का ये क्वेश्चन भी आता है, मिलर जो है ना मिलानोएट या मिलानोएट इनहिबिट विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग? तो सक्सिनेट से फ्यूमारेट के स्टेप को ये इनहिबिट करता है. तो इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसपोर्ट चेन को मेलानोएट इनहिबिट नहीं करता, साइनाइड करता है, एंटीमाइसिन ए भी करता है और रोटिनोन भी करता है, लेकिन मेलानोएट is not the inhibitor of the electron transport chain. It is the inhibitor of the citric acid in the step of the succinate to fumarate. Name the physiological uncoupler which stops ATP synthesis. So thermogenin is the physiological uncoupler which stops the ATP synthesis. Fermentation is similar to anaerobic expression. It is true or false? It is a false because fermentation and anaerobic expression differ from each other. दोनों different है क्यों? On the basis of the final electron acceptor. In fermentation, the final electron acceptor is an organic molecule, while in anaerobic expression, the final electron acceptor is inorganic molecule like nitrate, sulfate, carbonate, etc. What is the Cori cycle? तो Cori cycle की definition इसकी lactic acid cycle को हम Cori cycle कहते हैं. Which of the following is the correct for the posture effect? Increase glucose consumption by yeast in anaerobic condition. Carbohydrates are also known as the hydrates of the carbon. Class of carbohydrates which cannot be hydrolyzed further is known as the monosaccharide. It is very simple MCQs of bioenergetics. What is the Warburg effect? तो Warburg effect को हम कहते हैं shows increase glycolysis in cancer cells. जब कैंसर सेल्स में ग्लाइकोलाइसिस ज्यादा होगी उसको हम वार्बर इफेक्ट कहते हैं क्योंकि उसको ज्यादा एनर्जी की जरूरत होती है. मार्क द करेक्ट इक्वेशन फॉर रेस्पिरेटरी क्वेश्चन. तो रेस्पिरेटरी क्वेश्चन के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट ये एमसीक्यूज है बायोएनर्जेटिक्स का. रेस्पिरेटरी क्वेश्चन इज इक्वल टू कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड प्रोड्यूस्ड डिवाइडेड बाय ऑक्सीजन कंज्यूम्ड. तो इट इज द इक्वेशन फॉर रेस्पिरेटरी क्वेश्चन. The iron in the iron-heme complex of cytochrome. तो iron हमेशा flip flops between the reduced Fe2 and oxidized Fe3 states. Oxidative carboxylation is involve loss of carbon dioxide and production of NADH. So it is the definition of oxidative decarboxylation. Which of the following enzyme is inhibited by the fluoroacetate in Krebs cycle? तो फ्लोरो इसमें आता है एकोनाइटेज. Which of the following enzyme does not take part in pyruvate dehydrogenase complex? Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. How many molecules of carbon dioxide are produced by an acetyl group of acetyl coenzyme A in a citric acid cycle? तो इसमें सिर्फ 2 molecule carbon dioxide के produce होते हैं. Glycolysis pathway regulation involves all of the above. Allosteric stimulation by an ATP, allosteric inhibitor of ATP, feedback or product inhibition by ATP, all of the above. During metabolism, only about 40% of this energy available from oxidizing glucose is used to synthesize ATP. Remaining 60% जो होती है that is lost as a heat. Why does the glycolytic pathway continue in the direction of glucose catabolism? तो इसमें आता there are essentially 3 reversible reactions that act as the driving force. The release energy obtained by oxidation of glucose is stored as ATP. For every 1 molecule of sugar glucose which is oxidized, how much molecule of pyruvic acid is produced? Glycolysis का end product है 2 molecules of the pyruvic acid. In the glycogen synthase reaction, the precursor of to glycogen is it is a UDP glucose. UDP glucose. The active form of glycogen phosphorylase is phosphorylated while the dephosphorylation of which active form occurs. तो इसमें आएगा glycogen synthase. The amount of energy received from 1 ATP to it is 7.3 kilocalories. Respiration is a oxidative process. What is the respiratory substrate? तो the compounds which are oxidized during respiration उसको हम respiratory substrates कहते हैं. And a kinase is an enzyme that kinase क्या करता है uses ATP to add a phosphate group to the substrate. तो kinase हमेशा phosphate group को ऐड करता है और जब भी ऐड करेगा तो ATP को यूज करेगा. The enzyme of glycolysis in a eukaryotic cell are located in. तो glycolysis हमेशा cytosol में होती है. Which of the following condition occur by incomplete oxidation of respiratory substrates? तो incomplete oxidation of respiratory substrate में anaerobic condition होती है. Which of these enzymes in glycolysis do not take part in an irreversible reaction? Glucokinase will not involve in irreversible reaction. नेम द इनहिबिटर ऑफ ग्लाइकोलिसिस, इनमें से कौन सा ग्लाइकोलिसिस का इनहिबिटर? आयोडोएसीटेट इज द इनहिबिटर ऑफ ग्लाइकोलिसिस। नेम द साइट ऑफ पायरुवेट ऑक्सीडेशन, तो पायरुवेट की जो ऑक्सीडेशन होती है वो माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया मैट्रिक्स में होती है। Why, when concentration of the reactants is higher than the equilibrium concentration, then both B and C, the Gibbs free energy will be negative, more products will be formed. Bioenergetics. Which of the following is not the true of glycolysis? Basic of glycolysis में the pathway oxidizes 2 moles of NADH and NAD for each moles of the glucose that enters. In glycolysis, ATP is formed by the transfer of high-energy phosphate from 1,3-biphosphoglycerate to ADR. No such high-energy phosphate donors has ever been isolated in the mitochondria because no such phosphate donor exists. वहाँ पे कोई phosphate donor exist नहीं करता. ATP is a form which general category of molecule. तो ATP is mainly nucleotide की कैटेगरी में आता है. Adenosine triphosphate. What would be the molecular formula for a polymer made by linking 10 glucose molecules together by dehydration synthesis? If molecular formula for glucose is C6H12O6, तो इसमें आएगा आंसर नंबर C60 आएगा और H10 आएगा, सॉरी H102 आएगा और O51 आएगा, क्योंकि जो डिहाइड्रेशन सेंसेस से वाटर मॉलिक्यूल रिलीज होते रहेंगे और नंबर ऑफ जो हाइड्रोजन और ऑक्सीजन है वो कम होंगे. इन द ग्लाइकोलाइसिस रिएक्शन फॉर ईच ग्लूकोज कन्वर्जन हाउ मेनी एटीपीज आर प्रोड्यूस? तो ग्लाइकोलाइसिस के दौरान ओनली 2 एटीपीज आर प्रोड्यूस, 4 प्रोड्यूस 2 कंज्यूम्ड, और बाकी नेट क्या बच जाती हैं, 2 बच जाती हैं. An intermediate which inhibits the activity of fructose 1,6-diphosphate would inhibit gluconeogenesis. Which of the following enzyme plays an important role in the Cori cycle? अब Cori cycle हम पढ़ चुके हैं, तो इसमें lactate cycle होते हैं, तो ज़रा lactate dehydrogenase enzyme बहुत important role play करेगा. Regulated metabolic pathways are, all of these are the metabolic regulatory metabolic pathways. When living organism are cooled below some critical body temperature, the metabolic reactions within their cells cease to function properly. This malfunction occurs because there is insufficient molecular motion for substrates to interact. Glycogen degradation requires the enzyme mainly. कौन से एंजाइम चाहिए होते हैं? ग्लाइकोजन फॉस्फोराइलेज एंड ग्लाइकोजन डीब्रांचिंग एंजाइम्स आर रिक्वायर्ड फॉर ग्लाइकोजन डिग्रेडेशन. The hormone glucagon and epinephrine stimulate glycogen breakdown to glucose 6-phosphate. Glucose 6-phosphate, तो इसमें आएगा indirectly by first stimulating adenylate cyclase to make a cyclic AMP. The glycolytic pathway glucose to 2-pyruvate is found in all living organisms. What is the cause of the genetic disease known as the galactosemia? Galactosemia is due to the deficiency or absence of the galactose 1p-uridyl transferase. Which of the following could act as an uncoupler of electron transport and ATP synthesis? तो both A and B इसमें good option है, option number D. Which of the following is not a mechanism for altering the flux of metabolites through the rate determining step of pathways? So diffusional coupling between the adjacent active sites. Phosphofructokinase, the major flux controlling enzyme of the glycolysis, is allosterically inhibited and activated respectively by ATP and ADP. Which of the following regulates glycolysis steps? All of these involve in the regulation of the glycolysis steps: phosphofructokinase, hexose kinase, pyruvate kinase. Which of the following is a chemical link between catabolism and anabolism? So it is the ATP. For each molecule of glucose, how many times does the tricarboxyl cycle proceed? So it is 2 times. Which of the following is not an aerobic reaction? Fermentation is not an aerobic reaction. Glycolysis is also known as in the Embden-Meruf pathway. Yes, it is true. इसको EMP pathway भी कहते हैं. EMP Embden-Meruf pathway. Fructose 2,6 biphosphate, both B and C activates phosphofructokinase or inhibits fructose 1,6 biphosphatase. Glucose from the breakdown of glycogen is obtained in both A and B, liver by the phosphorylasis, muscles by the phosphorylasis. Each reaction in a metabolic pathway is catalyzed by a specific enzyme. During glycolysis, the major energy generating steps involve glyceraldehyde 3 dehydrogenase. During anaerobic condition, lactate travels from the muscles to the liver via the bloodstream. What is the lactic acid converted when is converted into when it reaches the liver there before it returns back to the muscles? तो इस ये convert हो जाता है glucose में. Acetyl coenzyme is a how much carbon compound? It is a 2 carbon compound. Which of the following does not occur during the gluconeogenesis? The conversion of pyruvate to phosphoenol pyruvate. It is not the step of gluconeogenesis. Which of the following characteristic enzyme of gluconeogenesis is not found in the cytosol? So it is pyruvate carboxylase. So pyruvate carboxylase is not found in the cytosol. So these are 100 most important MCQs on the bioenergetics and metabolism of the carbohydrates. In the next lecture, we will discuss more MCQs on the carbohydrates metabolism. Thank you so much. Keep watching Biology Learning Zone.